Good morning, friends. Welcome to the 14th weekly lecture of our program Samachar Manthan. And in this lecture, also, we'll start with the main issues. So, first issue which was in news in last 1, 2, 3 months is Section 497. So, this in simple language, it is called as adultery law. So, the definition of it mandates that whoever has sexual intercourse with a person who is and whom he knows and has a reason to believe to be the wife of another man without the consent of that man, such sexual intercourse, not amounting the offense of rape, is guilty of the offense of adultery and shall be punished. So if we understand this law through a diagram, so let's understand. So suppose there is a woman and there is a man, and this is the husband of this woman. If the woman has sexual intercourse with the man and the husband does not approve of that act, or husband is unaware of the act, then husband can prosecute that man. He can go to the court and say that this man has violated the adultery law, and that man can be punished for 5 years. This is the logic behind the law. Now, the law says that the woman, she cannot be punished. It is only because it is considered that wife is innocent. She does not have the mind of its own, and she is the property of the man. So ultimately, if the man has intercourse with the woman, ultimately he has violated the rights of the husband, because the wife is the property of the husband. Therefore, it is the husband who has the right to go to the court and file a case against that man. Now, there are two other issues in this act. So, if a man can prove in the court that he was unaware that the woman was not married. So if a man can prove in the court that I did not know that woman with whom I had intercourse, she was married. So in that case, adultery law would not be implemented on him and he would be saved. Second scenario in which he can be saved is when he can prove into the court of law that the husband was aware of his act, and this act was done with the consent of the husband. So if he can prove that husband allows of that act, then also adultery law would not be imposed on that man. So only on these two cases. And the third case is when he has raped that woman. So when he raped that woman, then the rape laws will be implied. It will not be, that man will not be punished under the adultery law, but he will be punished under the rape laws. So recently it was in news because court has agreed to hear to the petition regarding because many petitioners have filed a case in court that the court should relook in this section 497 and it should scrap section 497. So what will the court examine? So court would examine two things. First thing court would examine is that why does section 497 treat the men as the adulterer and the married woman as a victim? And second thing the court would examine is that is the wife the property of the husband? So these two things court will examine while giving a verdict on section 497. So why has what are the arguments in favor of scrapping section 497? Let's look into these arguments. First argument is that it is a violation of the constitutional principle. And what is the constitutional principle? The principle is Article 14, equality before the law. Also, because a man and a woman are treated unequally in this case. Because if you reverse the scenario, and if man commits the adultery act and the wife came to know about that, then the wife cannot file a case in the court, and the wife cannot file a case regarding the adultery law. So, if a husband is engaged in sexual relationship outside the marriage, then that can be a ground for a divorce. So a wife can go to the court and say, see, my husband is adulterous. He has committed a sexual act outside the marriage. Therefore, I want a divorce with him. But that cannot be a ground for punishment of the husband or the woman with whom he has committed the act. So it violates the principle, because it gives the power to the husband to prosecute his wife's lover, but it does not give the right to the woman to prosecute his husband or his husband's lover. That is why it is violating the constitutional principles of equality before the law. Secondly, it promotes the subordination of women. See, when this section was introduced, it was introduced in 19th century, when there was this this Victorian morality that was prevailing not just in India but also in England, where the wife was considered as the property of the husband. Wife did not have any or wife it was considered that wife do not have any independent mind of their own, and it was considered that before marriage the guardian of that woman is her father, and after marriage it will be her husband. But in this scenario in 2018, things have changed. Now the women are equal to the men. They are doing better than men in many fields. Now, I mean, you cannot you cannot imply the same standards that was implied 50 or 150 years ago. So this act, this is it is clear-cut violation of the modern day principles of the modern day society. Thirdly, international scenario. So in most of the countries, so this law was brought from Britain, and Britain abolished this law. And most of the progressive democracies, they have also abolished this law. Only in some Islamic countries they have this law. So this is also a solid ground why we should scrap the act or the section. Fourthly, it discriminates against the men, because all the blame is shifted on that man who was engaged in sexual act with wife of someone. Why should wife also not be prosecuted? I mean, if the relationship has happened with consent, then how can you only blame one party as responsible and other party as victim? Well, it is basically you are assuming it's like the same concept of love jihad, that our girls are very innocent, that's why they fall in trap of this, or they fall in trap of these Muslim men. I mean, why are you considering your women as brainless creatures? They are not brainless. If a woman is engaged in an act with full consent, then it is also her responsibility. If he is a major, if he is a minor, then if she is a minor, then it's a different scenario. But if she is more than 18 years old, she has equal mind, then she has as equal mind as a man, right? So it somehow it discriminates against the men. So these are the main reasons why, see, the problem in India is that in Indian kind of culture, marriage is considered as a sacrosanct thing. It's considered a sacred thing. And it has its patriarchal notions that after marriage, the wife is the property of the men. So this section is in that way. But now in this scenario, how could you have such discriminatory section like this? So that is why the petitioners are saying that this law should be scrapped. I mean, there are some laws where you don't have anything in favor. How could you support? How can you write a point in favor of these sections? These are sections which need to be abolished. There is no two sides of the argument. There is only one side of the argument in these sections. So this ends the first issue of the week, which is section 497. Let's move to the next issue, which is actually, it was an op-ed in EPW, and as I've told that we will be taking the most important op-eds which are there in EPW, because somehow EPW articles have a lot of content, a lot of data, and that can be used in enhancing your answers. So there was this op-ed in EPW, and the name of the op-ed was Circumscribed by Consumer Price. So this op-ed was written in the context of the recent RBI hike, where RBI has hiked the repo rate twice in last one quarter. So the reason the RBI gave for doing this hike was that RBI said that there is a chance that the inflation would breach the limits given by the monetary policy agreement. So let us understand what is the monetary policy agreement. So this agreement was done in 2015 between the RBI and the central government. And according to this agreement, by 2016, RBI would reduce the inflation rate to 6% plus minus 2, and in the following years, RBI would focus on reducing inflation to 4% plus minus 2. That should be the aim of the RBI, that the CPI inflation, the consumer price inflation, should remain in the bracket of 4 plus minus 2. So it can go up to 6 and it can go up to 2. It cannot go beyond that. So, and if it breaches this line, the RBI has to report to the central government why this has happened and what are the steps which RBI are taking to reduce the inflation or to bring it in this bracket. Now, after this agreement, the focus of RBI has been completely on reducing inflation within this bracket. Because before that agreement, RBI used to play a major role. It used to focus on employment, on growth, on inflation and other things also. But after this agreement, the sole focus of RBI has been only on the CPI inflation. And that is what this op-ed talks about, that this is not the right way to do things. This is what this op-ed is criticizing RBI for, that you have completely started focusing on CPI inflation. You have forgot that your mandate, your original mandate talks about that you should focus not just on inflation, but also on growth and employment and also on development goals. So your focus should be multi-dimensional. It should not be just on inflation. So the reason why RBI said that it has increased the repo rate, it said that it wants to reduce the CPI inflation within the mandated range. So there are three reasons, or there are three arguments which this OPED talks about, that why the sole focus of RBI on CPI is not correct. The first reason is that focusing on CPI means that you are ignoring the wider development goals. So in a country like India, the central bank, because the role in West and in India is different. In West, they have already achieved a high growth rate, they have already have less unemployment. But in a country like India, where there is so much social inequality, where there is so much unemployment, so much poverty, the focus of RBI, according to this OPED, is that they should focus on all of them. They should not just focus on inflation. Second is that inflation in India is largely because of supply side issues. So see, there are two kinds of inflation: uh, demand side inflation and supply side inflation. In the West, basic problem, mostly the problem is because of demand side inflation, because the demand is too high. That is why there is inflation. In most of the developing countries, the inflation is because of supply side issues. There is not enough production in the economy. That is why we are facing the problem of inflation. So in India, there are two main reasons behind inflation. One is food prices, or one is food, and second is oil sector, oil and fuel. Now in both these sectors, RBI has limited control. It is the finance ministry which will decide the price of these sectors, because ultimately the RBI cannot do anything to increase the food production. It is ultimately the Ministry of Agriculture which will have to give MSPs and other incentives to boost the agriculture production. RBI, by increasing or decreasing repo rate, cannot affect that inflation. And the major chunk of inflation is because in India is because of food sector, because of lack of production of food grains, or because of mismanagement in the whole kind of structure, because of supply chain problems, etc. So, RBI, by increasing repo rate, if it thinks that it can control inflation, then it is misjudged. Because mostly, it's not, by repo rate, you cannot curb inflation, you cannot reduce CPI. And by increasing repo rate, you are actually making investment tougher in the economy, because high interest rate would mean that it would disincentivize investment in the economy. And if investment would decrease, then ultimately the growth will suffer, right? Third argument is that there are multiple measures of inflation, and these are CPI, WPI, GDP deflators. So this argument says then inflation is not actually bad for a developing economy. If you see in the period when India faced the highest economic growth since independence, 2004 and 2004 to 8, the inflation was really high. It was 10%, 11%, 12%, 9%. So inflation was really high, and inflation was really high because the demand in the economy was very much, because of growth rate, people had more money with them. When they had more money with themselves, they demand more things. When they demand more things, it gives an incentive to the supplier, or it gives an incentive to the manufacturer to produce more, right? So and when he will produce more, there will be overall economic growth in the economy. This is how the system works. And there is an example of this op-ed says, it says about the dairy sector in Gujarat. In the dairy sector, because of increasing prices of milk, it gave incentive to the milk producers to produce more milk, and that is why and that is how this sector got boost, right? So therefore it says that when you completely focus on inflation 4%, then that somehow it hurts growth also. That is the reason why the agriculture growth rate got reduced in last few years, because the price of crops fell to a really bad level, low level. Therefore the farmers did not have the incentive to produce, right? So a healthy inflation is necessary in a growing economy. So it has given some suggestions, that it has said that RBI should manage between the inflation and the development goals. Also, the RBI should aim at promoting the financial saving in the economy. It should ensure that there should be a positive rate of return to depositor on their bank deposits. It should also give some give some fiscal incentive to the small savers. So all these things it has recommended. So this ends the second issue of the week, which is circumcised by the consumer price. Let's move to the third issue, which is data localization issue. This actually I mentioned in the 11th week that I'll be taking, but somehow I forgot. So why this issue was in news? Because draft e-commerce policy and draft data protection bill, it seeks localization of data. It talks that data in India should be localized. So what exactly is data localization? So data localization means that if some data is generated in India, then that data should also be stored, it should also be processed inside India. So if Flipkart has people buy from Flipkart, so Flipkart gets information about those persons. Or let's take example of Paytm. So when you open an account of Paytm, you need to give some information. So the Paytm have your data. Now, whether that data would be stored and processed inside India, because there are data centers which store and process the data, or if the data is sent outside and it is stored and processed abroad. So if it is processed abroad, then that is not data localization. But if it is mandatory to store in India, then that term is called as data localization, which means that data is generated and stored inside the boundary of that country. So as you know, that data has now become the new oil. I mean, it has so much importance. People are paying money to get data because it's the whole system, the whole e-commerce thing, the whole online thing, it works on the data thing. So let's deal with the arguments in favor and against data localization. So the first argument in favor of data localization is that issue of data protection and privacy. So when your data is sent outside India, there is no regulatory body. There is the government of India cannot take action against anyone if your data is misused, because it's not within the jurisdiction of the government to take action against the foreign companies when everything is happening abroad. So it is not within the control of the government to oversee how your data is being used. Therefore, it raises the problem of protection of your data protection and privacy. Second is national security issue. So experts have said that the data could be used by, so if suppose your data is being stored and processed in US, now the CIA or the FBI forces those companies to share the data with them, and it can give rise to what you call as surveillance by the foreign intelligence agencies. And if that happens, that could threaten the national security of the country. Third is international experience. So, most of the developing countries of the world they have adopted this data localization norms. So countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Iran, Brunei, Brazil, Korea, Nigeria, and Russia all have mandated these data localization norms. So it is, what we are doing is something which all the other emerging economies are doing. Fourthly, it would give boost to jobs in India. So if data would be localized, then there will be a large number of data centers which will have to be created, which will have to be built in India, and those data centers would employ people, would employ graduates, and this would give boost to jobs in India. So we, as you know, that we are facing the problem of jobless growth, and this would create enough jobs in India. Also, as you know, see, like the call centers in India just created 2 million jobs. But when a building is built, you need a chai wala also, you need a tapri also, it gives job to the auto people, it gives job to the cab driver, it gives job to the it gives jobs to the pubs who are created next to these BPO buildings. So the indirect job creation is more than the direct job creation of these BPOs. Same will happen with the data centers. So the associated infrastructure and the associated job it will create will somehow solve the job problem in India. Let's move to the other side of the argument, which is argument against data localization. So the first argument against it is that it could hurt the domestic industry. So as you know that the the countries in the West, they have expertise in data storing and processing. Therefore, the cost of data storage and processing is low compared to India, where we are just in a nascent phase. We are just in the initial phase. Now, the startups and the small and medium enterprises, uh, it would hurt them badly because it would increase the cost of data storage and processing. And since they already function at a very low level, they don't have the capacity. The experts are saying they don't have the capacity to absorb these losses, and many of them would close, or it would make them uncompetitive. So that is the reason why they say that data localization, or data localization, is not a right way to do. Yes, if you want, it is good that data should be stored in India, but that can be done by giving some incentives. Outrightly banning data outsourcing would hurt the small and the medium enterprises and the startups in the short run. Second, that it could lead to retaliation. So most probably, if India will do that, it will lead to retaliation by the Western countries. And if that happens, that could completely, destroy the outsourcing industry in India, because the outsourcing industry in India is based on the data which the US or which the other developed country gives. Right, they gives the data, right, that you have to call this person in Michigan, or you have to call this person in Boston. The call center, the international call centers in India, they do the same job. The companies provide them the data, and then they use the data to call them. So if the other countries also ban this outsourcing, then it could completely demolish the outsourcing industry, or the BPO industry in India. Third is, it can lead to surveillance state. So as you know that if all the data will be stored in India, and the intelligence agencies in India are very powerful, the state can become really powerful. The state can force these companies to share the data with them, and that can lead to snooping and surveillance, not by the foreign intelligence but by Indian intelligence themselves. So as you know that most of the countries which have applied these data localization norms, they're not very democratic countries. So all the truly democratic countries, hardly any country has adopted these norms. So there is a apprehension that it could create a snooping surveillance state in India. Also, local storage does not guarantee privacy. Now, we just few days back there was this news which said that Aadhaar data is being leaked for some rupees. Now, if Aadhaar data can be leaked so easily, what guarantee do we have that these data are also not leaked? So whether it's stored in India or outside, it cannot guarantee privacy unless and until we don't have a strong data privacy law. Till we don't have strong data privacy law, this argument that if we allow the data to travel outside, that could create a privacy problem in India, because that can also happen in India also. If the data is stored in India, then also that same problem can happen. So what is the way forward? So like all the way forwards that we deal, this will also be a balanced way forward. So uh, the experts are saying that yes, the intention of the government is good, but protection protection is not the right way. We have seen everywhere that protection has created it has created inefficiency in India. So the right way to deal with this is that you should give boost to the local data centers in India. And how can you give them the boost? You can give them the boost by providing them right infrastructure, by providing them right tax incentive, by providing them electricity, by providing them proper internet connectivity, by training, by skilling people so that they can handle the data. So the way forward is that we should create a proper infrastructure. See, if we will do that, then the cost of storing and processing data in India will reduce. Then the small and medium enterprises and the startups, they will lose the incentive of sharing the data or of sending the data to abroad locations, because then it would be easier for them to send that data to the data centers located in India, because they are also cheap. Abhi, the problem is about the cost. But India is inefficient. Therefore, if they send the data to the data centers, then it would be more costly for them. If Indian data centers would become competitive like this, if it can become strong, then there would be no incentive for the SME and the startups to send their data to the abroad centers. So rather than protect, or rather than banning it, which is an extreme step, and that can, as I've told, that can lead to retaliation, that could jeopardize India's relations with many of the Western countries, our focus should be on boosting our own data centers without any outright ban, right? And once the data centers in India have become strong, then this problem will be solved completely, because our companies will not transfer the data to foreign locations. Also, we should first create a or we should enact a strong data protection law, because without that, as I've told, there is no guarantee that the data is safe in India. So we need to enact a strong data protection law, which can severely penalize any misuse of the data, either by the private parties or by the state. Also, the government should focus on enhanced cooperation between all the stakeholders in the global arena through prolific debates, and it should talk with them, and through talking with the stakeholders, it should take any further decision. So this ends this very important issue, which is data localization issue. Let's move to the next issue, which is Indian Post Payment Bank. So recently, Prime Minister Modi has launched the Indian Post Payment Bank, and Payment Bank, as you know, is a bank. It's kind of a differentiated bank which is used for sending remittances or for transferring remittances through digital way. So, what is the primary objective of setting this payment bank? So the primary objective of this bank is to further financial inclusion by providing small saving accounts and payment slash remittance services to the migrants, to the people who are to the migrant labor force, to the low income households, to the small businesses, and to the people in the unorganized sectors who are living in cities. So what are the services that this payment bank will provide? So first of all, it will provide the facility of demand deposit, which will include savings and current account. And you can remit up to 1 lakh rupees in that account. Also, it provides access to third party financial services like insurance, mutual funds, and pensions. So if you go to a bank, that bank will tie up with these insurance, these mutual funds, and these pension companies, and you can buy these insurance and all these products in the branch of that bank. Thirdly, it can issue ATM and debit cards, but it cannot issue the credit card. Since the bank can only, so there are two main functions of the bank. One is to accept the demand deposits, and second is to ensure transfer of remittances from one account to another. It is not involved in the activity of giving loans. So that is why, since it can't give loans, there is no, or it's very natural that it will not provide the credit card facilities. Also, cross-border remittances can be done using this. So in a lot of villages, especially in Punjab, there are people who are in Canada. So these people in Canada can use this payment bank to transfer money to their relatives in the villages. Next is, how will it promote rural banking, or what you call as significance or advantages of IPPB? See, you must be aware with the fact that post office has the widest reach in India. Almost every village in India have post office. So and banks do not have that reach. I mean, it's expensive for a bank to create branches in small villages, but since India Post does not operate on the profit basis or with the profit motive, it operates on the basis of welfare of the people. Therefore, it does not use this business principle for establishing any branch in any villages. Now, according to the data, there are around 1,55,000 post offices in India, and to ensure that this bank succeeds, the India Post will deploy around 3 lakh postmen and Dak Sevak with cell phones and biometric device. So these postmen these postmen or these dark savers will transform into the BC, or what you call is business correspondent. So they would be given a smartphone with a biometric attached in, and they can go door to door. They can go to door in every village, and they can tell them, if you want to open an account in this bank, in this payment bank, we will do it for you. It will take just 5 minutes. So rather than you, अभी तक क्या था, अभी तक the thing was that you had to go to the post office branch, and then you have to open the account, then you have to kind of submit documents and so many complications, and then your account used to be open in the post office savings accounts. Now the bank will come to you through these gram sevaks and through these postmen, and it will be so easy for you. You will be just in your home and your account would be open. So it would give boost to financial inclusion process in the rural India, because it would, the reach would be it would make the reach very accessible. And according to the estimates, it would scale up the rural banking ecosystem by 3.5 times. 3.5 times. Also, with IPPV in place, people in rural India, they would be able to avail digital banking and financial services, including money transfer to any bank account, either with the help of mobile app or by visiting a post office. So see, under this IPPB, you can transfer your money using any kind of method like RTGS, NEFT, IMPS, any kind of through any kind of method you can transfer the money. Now this is different from the post office saving bank, because in post office saving bank you can transfer the money only by using that account. But this would make things so easier. You are sitting in city, you want to send money to your family back home. It's just, you can just use through the mobile app. It will take just 2 minutes for you to transfer the money using IMPS or RTGS or NEFT method, right? And fourthly, it would enable the government to distribute Manrega wages, subsidies, and pensions through these payment bank accounts. So it would actually give boost to the DBT method, because as you know that still some people in India don't have bank account. After this, everybody will have bank accounts, because ultimately it will be the responsibility of these postmen to ensure that everybody in the village it has been assigned, they have the bank account. So once that account would be open, it will become very easier for the government to transfer the wages or transfer the subsidies or the pensions in these accounts. And also lastly, IPPB will enable the people in rural India or the customers of this bank to avail for around 100 services. So it can pay the phone recharge bill, the electricity bill, the DTH services, the college fees. All of that could be done through the use of IPPB. So all different kinds of fees can be paid using the IPPB. Now let's look into some of the challenges in its operation. So first and most important challenge is that it's a government body, and like any other kind of government body, it is run by the bureaucrats, and bureaucrats are, I know they're not very efficient. So first challenge is to make it financially viable, because ultimately the Indian Post Payment Bank will give 4% interest rate on the deposits. Now, and it will, since it cannot lend, it will be difficult for the bank to pay that 4,000 to pay that 4% interest rate, and also to maintain financial viability, because the only area where it can invest is in government bonds. So in government bonds, you will get around 6%, 6 to 6.5%, and it gives 4% interest rate to the depositors. The second way it can finance itself is by charging a small fees when you transfer money from one account to another account. So the experts are saying that the margin will not be very high. So it will have to, innovate some ways through which it can get some resources. Otherwise, it would become just like Air India, a burden on the government, run by government subsidies, and being a drain on taxpayers' money. So this is the biggest challenge for in its operation. Also, it has to face intense competition from the private sector, because private sector, as you know, that some licenses for these banks have been given to Airtel and some other private companies. So this is also a big challenge for the Indian Post Payment Bank. Now let's move to the next issue, which is also an op-ed, and this is by Ashok Gulati, and I mostly include op-eds from Ashok Gulati because they are really relevant for your UPSC exam. So, name of the op-ed is Maharashtra versus Market. So the op-ed starts with telling that the number of state governments and the central government have been launching farmer-friendly incentives. Like Hunter has announced that it will fix MSP at 50% above the A2 plus FL cost. Now, what is A2 and FL? So there are three kinds of cost which the government takes into consideration while while announcing the MSP price. So first is, according to the CSEP definition, there are three kinds of cost. One is A2 cost. So A2 cost, it covers all the paid expenses. So all the paid expenses which the farmer bears, like on seed, on fertilizers, on hired labor, on chemicals, on fuel, on irrigation, all of them come under the category of A2. Next is A2 plus FL. A2 plus FL, it not just covers the explicit cost but also implicit cost of labor. So if I am working, if in a farm, three members of the family are working, I also have a opportunity cost. If I may not be working in the field, I would have been doing some other job. I would have been, so by working in the field, I am losing that job. I'm losing that money which I could have earned through the other jobs. So that is, and plus also since I'm working, I need to be paid some wage, right? So A2FL includes explicit plus implied cost of labor. Then there is another which is C2. C2 means comprehensive cost, and this includes A2 plus FL plus the implied cost of capital and land. So I am doing farming in the land, which means my land is being used for this, and I am losing. If I would have not, if I would have not done the farming, probably I would have given this land for some other purpose, and I would have derived some rent from that. Right? So the rent which is foregone is also a cost to me. So if that is also included, then that is called as C2 cost. So the farmers organization are demanding that we should be given C2 plus 50% as MSP. And government has announced that it will give A2 plus FL as MSP. So this is not the issue which this op-ed raises. It raises other issues that states have allocated different schemes. Like Madhya Pradesh have launched this price deficiency payment, which I think I have explained once. But it focuses on the recent decision of Maharashtra, where Maharashtra has announced that it has made it mandatory for the traders to buy the crops from the farmers at MSP price. The context of this op-ed is that Maharashtra has made it mandatory. Announced that if the trader does not borrow or does not buy the good at MSP, then 50,000 rupees of fine would be imposed on him. So according to Ashok Gulati, this the decision could have three implications. Let's look into those three implications. First implication is, or in the first scenario, uh, let us assume that traders fall in line and buy everything at MSP prices. In that case, the prices of the goods, because generally MSP prices are high, so the general inflation, the food inflation would Maharashtra would increase, and the consumers will have to bear the burden. And no government wants prices to be high. No government wants that consumers should feel the brunt of rising prices. So this is also, it says it's not feasible because it would lead to food inflation in Maharashtra, and consumers would face the burden. Second scenario is when a private trader buys at MSP and unloads the produce at a prevailing market price that are below MSP, and incurs heavy loss. Now, this Ashok Gulati says that no rational trader would do that. How could you buy at a higher price and sell at a lower price? He will leave the business and he will shut his shop. In the third scenario, if suppose Maharashtra's neighbor like MP, Gujarat, Karnataka are selling the same crop at below MSP price. In that case, these traders would shift to these states. They would leave the Maharashtra because they are facing loss in Maharashtra, and they will go to these neighboring states and they will trade there. This would mean that private trading in India, the private trading in Maharashtra would end, and then the government would have to take the task of procuring and also taking that, I mean, that food crops, because ultimately if the private traders would not be there, then the state would be responsible for not just announcement but procurement of all the crops or all the produce which is produced by the farmers, and the government does not have the storage, right? And it would mean that the crops would be rotten, it would be wastage, and plus it would increase subsidy burden on the government. Plus, as you know, that government is known for inefficiencies. It could create a problem in the whole food market. So therefore he says that the decision of Maharashtra is not practical, it's impractical, it's infeasible, and it will not work in any of the three scenarios. So he has suggested some steps which all the state governments should take. So he says that we should understand that farmers are not, the problem in India is that we treat farmers as someone who requires our donation. Treat farmer like a business, treat farming as a business, and treat farmer as a rational businessman. So what we should do is that we should get the market right, and the job of the government should be to facilitate a conducive environment for the farmers to flourish. So what are the steps he has suggested? First thing which the government do is that it should reform the archaic laws like the Essential Commodities Act 1955 and the APMC Act. The problem with Essential Commodities Act is that whenever it is imposed, private storages, because this act was enacted in order to ensure that there is no black marketing, right? Because black marketing was one of the reasons for the droughts and the famines in the pre-independence India. So this act was enacted, but the problem is that every year government enacts this act for one or two produce, then it bans export, it bans its storage, it bans the private storage. Ultimately this incentivizes the private sector from investing in the storage thing, because it knows that government will enact ECA or it will impose ECA on any of the crop, then this storage facility would go waste. So why to invest so much money in creating that storage facility? So this is the reason. And APMC Act, that APMC Act is inefficient, where there is so much exploitation of the farmers, and there is the dominance of the mandis. Next is we should invite the private sector to build storage, to focus on grading, packing, grading and packing facilities. And for that, government can give loan to these farmers producer organizations. Also, we should create competition for the APMC by facilitating private mandis. So some states in South India have done that, and that has led to a lot of farmers bypassing the APMC, because see, abhi the law says that the farmers have to sell their products to the APMC. They have no other option, and that then because of this monopoly, APMC gives them the APMC does not give them the fair price, because they know that they can't go anywhere else. So the substitute of that is that you create private mandis, you allow private mandis, and through that, then the farmers will have the option that if you don't give us good price, we will go there. Then APMC will be forced to give them good prices. Next is we should also freeze the commission of the commission agents. Now, this is because so you have these commission agents in these mandis, and they charge commission from both the buyers and the sellers, and they charge heavy commission and they don't do anything. So he is recommended that it should be freezed at 2%. And also, there should be these big agro processors, these online, e-commerce players. All these should be invited to buy directly from the farmers producer organization without paying any market fee. Also, export bans needs to be banned, and minimum export price should be used judicially. All these steps it is suggested to ensure that the farmers get the right price. So this ends the fifth issue. Let's move to the next issue, which is why ethanol blending might not work in India. That's a op-ed in Live Mint. And so this ethanol blending has been in news recently because government has said that by 2030 at least 20% of the petrol will be blended with, or at least in the petrol there will be 20% component of ethanol. So what do we mean by ethanol blending? So ethanol blending is a process of mixing petrol with ethanol, and ethanol is derived from sugarcane molasses. It is also used for alcohol making, and in India ethanol blending program was started in 2003, in 2001, and in 2009 it was made mandatory that 5% there will be 5% ethanol blending. So what are the benefits of ethanol blending? So let's look into the other different sectors. If we talk of environment, so as you know that ethanol blending is not a fossil fuel, it's a biofuel, and biofuel is much more environmental friendly than the fossil fuel. So it would significantly reduce the carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide emission. If we talk of economy, it would be beneficial because it would reduce the import of the fossil fuel. It will reduce the import of the oil and diesel, and that would save precious foreign exchange reserves for India, and that would reduce the fiscal and current account deficit. Second advantage of this is that it is cheaper compared to petrol. And thirdly, it could give boost to, it could raise the farmer, it could raise the income of the farmers. So with ethanol blending program, government could also announce MSPs for the molasses. And so the farmer, because right now molasses is a waste, it's a byproduct, right? So the farmers would be able to earn from that byproduct, and that would increase the income of the farmers, and it will go a long way in doubling the income of the farmers. Let's talk about geopolitics. So it would reduce, since it would reduce the need for oil import, it would be it would reduce the dependency of India on oil import countries. You know, we would be, will be in long run, we would be able to become self-sustainable. The biggest example of this is Brazil. Brazil have now become mostly self-sufficient. It has stopped. It's because the reason why we are involved in geopolitics is because we want oil. So once we will have self-sufficiency in oil, we would be a more stronger nation, right? We could take more stronger decisions at a geopolitical level. And fourth is technological. So this would, the ethanol has higher octane rating than ethanol free petrol. Also in economy thing, we can also say it would create jobs. Now, this OPIT says that though ethanol blending is a good idea, but it may not work in case of India, and it has given two, three reasons behind that. The reason why ethanol blending may not work for India, first is the water uses. So in India, as Niti Aayog report has highlighted, that we are facing the worst ever water crisis of the century. And for ethanol, you need to grow more sugarcane. And sugarcane, as you know, is a water intensive crop. It uses a lot of water. If we will grow more sugarcane, this would worsen the already worsened the groundwater resources, and it would create scarcity of water for drinking purposes, for the day-to-day use purposes. Brazil and other countries succeeded because they had water resources, but we do not have the water resources. The water resources in India are much less compared to Brazil and other countries. Second is land resources. So it is estimated that right now sugarcane on the 3% of total uh, net zone area, sugarcane is grown. And if you want to raise the level, if you want to raise the ethanol blending level to 20%, then at least 10% of the total net zone area, on 10% of the total net zone area, sugarcane has to be grown. So we don't have the land, first of all. If we will increase the land for sugarcane, it would reduce the land for the food crops. So it could create a problem of food scarcity in India. It could create a problem of food inflation in India if we will focus more on sugarcane and ethanol and less on the food crops. And third is the capacity of the biorefineries. So the biorefineries in India, according to the India's biofuel policy says that fuel requirement must not compete with the food requirement, and only the surplus food crop could be used for the fuel production. So right now, the annual capacity of biorefineries in India is 300 to 400 million liters, which is still not enough to meet 5% ethanol blending. So how will you increase the capacity of the biorefineries? That is also an issue, because for 20% you need your biorefinery should have more capacity. From where you get the raw materials and all, that will be a problem. So because of these 3-4 reasons, it says that though it's an ambitious initiative, but on practical level this initiative would not work much in India. So it has said that in long run, if we want to use this ethanol blending program, we need to find ways of growing sugarcane through minimum water usage. So we can focus on drip irrigation, we can focus on sprinkler irrigation. We should ensure that the capacity of biorefineries are developed. Only in that case we will be able to fulfill the target of the government, which is 20% ethanol blending with petrol. Let's move to the next issue, which is also an op-ed, and it says that it talks about the reasons why we have so many out of school children in India. So according to the NSS data, there are around 4.5 crore children in the age group of 6 to 18 years who are out of school. And this is actually in rural India, 17% of children are out of school, and in urban area it is 13%. Also, most of the children who are out of the school, they belong to the SC, ST and the Muslim community and the OBC community. So what are the reasons? Because the RT Act mandates that everyone should go to school. I mean, it is compulsory now for every child to attend the school. So why are the reasons for so much dropout? First reason is for the boys. They have to support their family. Because as you know, there is the saying that more in the poor households, they say that the more the number of members, the more the income they will earn, because they will be more the workers they will get. So most of these, so suppose if somebody has a tea stall, right? If a children goes to school, who will help, who will assist the father in serving teas? And as you know that it's a small scale business, so he cannot hire a worker, so it has to be a family business. So that is why, it forces them, the father forces the child to not to go to school, because he is not aware of the fact that, if he will go to school, probably when he will grow old, he will not be able to sell tea. He would be doing some good job, but that long sighted thing is not there in most of the poor households. The first reason is, in case of girls, it is to participate in the household work. Because you know that, girls, the main role, it is said that, for education is nothing. After that, they will have to get married and they have to work in the household. So most of the girls, they are enrolled and they are dropped out, because the parents feel that they will be more useful if they work in the household and support their mother. Third reason is because of lack of availability of schools. So the RT Act mandated that there should be a school there should be a primary school every 1 kilometer and upper primary school every 3 kilometers, but that has not happened. That is why a lot of girls, they don't feel, and even the boys, they feel that if they go to school, it will waste their 1 2 hours going, 1 2 hours coming. And for the girls, it's not considered safe, because there have been incidences of many of them being eve teased on the way, some of them, molested, raped, etc. This is also the reason why many of the girls, drop out. Fourth reason is lack of toilets for girl child. So because of lack of toilet, and it's not safe to go in the out, that also incentivizes the girls to drop out. Also, there is a lack of awareness. There is lack of awareness among the parents that now education is a legal right. It is mandatory. You have to send them for 8 years of education. Also, they are not, because of sheer level of poverty in India, the families lose the thinking that of they lose the thinking ability of thinking in long term basis. They think that, short term, we require our children to work so that we can eat food, right? So they don't think in long term ways, that if they educate their child would be in a better place, he would have a better lifestyle, he will have a better standard of living. And this is actually the reason also for the child labor in India, because the RTE Act says that if a student in this age is not going to school, he would be considered as a child labor. So what can be done to bring more children to schools? First of all, we should ensure that primary schools are established every 1 kilometer. Also, in short run, till the time we are not we are not able to, because these schools cannot be built in one day, it takes time. We should ensure that there should be proper arrangement of mobility of of child, especially the girl child, from her home to school. So in that case, you can take the example of Bihar. Bihar has provided cycles to every girl child. Through using cycles, they can travel long distances and go to school. So this model can be adapted in other areas also. There could be minivan, there could be rickshaws, which could be started so that which can take the students from home to school if the school is little far away. So that is also that can also be done. Thirdly, we can include in the RTE Act that the government should give some financial support to the poor parents if they send their kids to the school. See, the main reason why the see, every parent want good for their child, but the main reason why they are forced to drop out is because the economic condition of the family is so bad that they need the child to work in order to eat food. So if the state can provide them with some funds, and that funds can only be provided if they send their kids to school, that will go a long way in incentivizing the parents to send their school to the or to send their kids to the school. So all these innovative steps could be taken in order to ensure that the students who are enrolled in school, they complete their at least primary and upper primary education. Let's move to the next issue, which uh, it's an op-ed, and it is a very important op-ed actually. And the name of the op-ed is "A New Chinese Threat Warrants a Review of NFU Policy." So recently it was in news that China is developing a India specific long term rocket that can fly over the Himalayas from Tibet, and it could be used to launch attacks on the mainland Indian cities. So the intention behind the development of the rocket is to hit the heartland of India in case of any future war between India and China. And the Doklam standoff is considered as the main reason behind the development of this rocket. So, what does this imply? I mean, why has China developing this kind of rocket? First reason is that China does not think that it can impose its will on India in a border conflict. So as we have seen in a Doklam, China tried to pressurize India, but India did not kind of withered away, and finally this standoff was solved. Even in 1967-87, when there was this little bit of border conflict, India stood the ground, and China was not able to do anything. So, and China, as you know, will require a 10-1 force advantage to overwhelm the strong Indian defensive force in the Himalayas. So therefore, it feels like it feels like with this rocket, it can force India, it can blackmail India to withdraw. Second reason why China is developing this thing is because China is considering the feasibility of total war. So now China thinks that in order to in order to achieve its objective, China does not, in future if there's a conflict, China does not want to restrict it to the border. It wants to strike the mainland India. So for that, it is developing this rocket. So why does China developing this rocket when it has so much nuclear weapons, and it also has conventional weapons installed at Tibet which can easily reach India? The reason behind this is that it is very cheap to make this rocket. So let us understand this thing that there are two kinds of weapons. One is conventional weapon, and another is weapons of mass destruction. This is a normal weapon which does not have any nuclear, chemical or biological component. This includes nuclear, chemical and biological weapons. Now China knows this thing that if it will launch a conventional weapon attack in main Indian cities, it would not force the India to respond it with nuclear attack. The reason behind that is because India has signed a no first use policy. India has actually not signed, India has actually stated after the Pokhran attack, after the Pokhran test, India has said to the West and to the UN that we will not use nuclear weapons till it is not used against us. So if some country uses nuclear weapon against us, only in that case we will be able to, or we will use the nuclear weapon. Now China knows this thing that India has the no first use policy. So China knows this thing that if it will attack Indian cities in case of war with conventional weapons, then India will not be able to reply back with the nuclear weapons. And China knows the fact that India does not have the capacity to, because see, all the big cities of China like Beijing, like Shanghai, they are around 4,000 kilometers from Indian mainland. Right. And India has only one missile, which is Agni 5, which can target Shanghai and Beijing. But Agni 5 is a nuclear warhead. It's a nuclear missile. Therefore, India does not have any conventional weapon which can hit Shanghai and Beijing. And China does know it very well. India has no first use policy. So if China would attack India with conventional weapons installed in Tibet, India will have no option. India cannot use nuclear weapon, right? And India's conventional weapon system does not have the capacity to hit Shanghai and Beijing. So it would be a psychological, it would, if in case of future border conflict, China can threaten India with the use of conventional weapon, with it can threaten India with the use of this rocket to force the Indian army to go back. So this is the Chinese strategy. Now, the op-ed says, therefore, the time has come for India to do two things. Firstly, it should review its no first policy, no first use policy. Because if India will review the no first use policy, then China will be under threat that if it uses rocket or conventional weapon against India, India can reply back with the use of Agni 5 nuclear warhead. So India should do that because now the time has come with Chinese developing a lot. Even the Pakistan has been developing a lot of conventional weapons. So time has come for India to review the no first use policy. And secondly, India should also build these kinds of rockets because the gap between China and India is growing, not just in nuclear warheads but also in conventional warheads. Even Pakistan has gone ahead of India. So time has come for India to develop a lot of conventional weapons because they are cheap. They are cheap to develop. So India can develop that, and India can also install that in Arunachal Pradesh or in Sikkim. Let's move to the last main issue of the week, which is draft e-pharmacy, draft rules on e-pharmacy. So, Health Ministry has recently came out with draft rules on sale of drug by e-pharmacy with the aim to regulate the online sale of medicines in India. So, why do we require the rules? Why did we require the rules, separate rules? Well, at present, there is lack of clarity on provisions to regulate online pharmacies in India because Indian Drug and Cosmetic Act does not differentiate between the drugs sold online and in the brick and mortar retail stores. Also, uh, since there is lack of clarity on the regulatory environment, there have been less number of players in the e-pharmacy market. So a clear-cut rules and regulations will incentivize more players to come into the market. It will create more competition, and it would, and ultimately the consumer would be the beneficiary. So what are the key features of the draft rule? Firstly, there is the registration has been made mandatory for the e-pharmacy. So the draft says that no person will distribute or sell or stock or exhibit or offer for sale of drugs through e-pharmacy unless registered. So any person who wants to start this, it has to first take permission from the central licensing authority, and central drug standards control organization has been made a nodal agency for regulating the e-pharmacy sector. And once that e-pharmacy unit would be registered, it will be registered for 3 years. Secondly, the patient's privacy would be protected. So the details of the patients would be kept confidential, and only when central government and state government mandates, only in that case it will be revealed, otherwise it would be a crime. Also, there are certain other restrictions which are imposed, like sale of psychotropic drugs, narcotics, and habit forming drugs have been banned. Also, it would be binding on the e-pharmacy to deliver the drug in specific time. And thirdly, hotels will have to have mandatory 24/7 call centers, and also the premises from where the e-pharmacy business is conducted shall be inspected every 2 years by the team of officers from the Central Licensing Authority. So this ends the main issues of the week. We will start with the prelims issues of the week. Let's move to the next part, which is the prelims issues. So first issue is Nepal and India agree to finalize MAU on Raxaul Kathmandu railway line. So there have been negotiations going on from last many years about a railway line going from Raxaul, which is in Bihar, to Kathmandu, which is in Nepal. And this talks were going on, but there were some problems regarding land acquisition and some concerns raised by the Nepali side. That's why this deal was stuck. But in last 1-2 years, China has also spread its feather. Now China has proposed that it will also connect Tibet with Kathmandu through a railway line, but it is not very easy for China to connect because it's a mountain zone and it's a seismic zone. So there have been kind of concerns raised by environmentalists that it could make the area more vulnerable to earthquake. But there is no problem with in case of Raxaul and Kathmandu railway link because it goes through the plains. Raxaul is a plain. So that is why India, because of Chinese pressure, India started giving more focus on this railway line. Now once it will be done, it is aimed to enhance the peoples to people and economic engagement and economic connectivity between India and Nepal. Let's move to the next issue, which is recently the first review meeting of Department of Official Language was conducted. So, Home Minister has chaired the first review meeting of the Department of Official Language, and Department of Official Language is actually a part of Ministry of Home Affairs. It could be a trivia for pre, and its job is to promote the use of Hindi language in central government. So the minister was informed that there have been 3 or 4 apps which have been developed with respect to official language. One of them is the Contest app. This app has been developed, or it will be used for translating the official files from English to Hindi and vice versa to make the translation work simpler and quicker. Next is Leela mobile app. This app has been developed for making the learning of Hindi language easier. And third is the Pravaha app. So you have to remember the app. They can be asked in pre that Anthas, Leela, and Pravaha app are related to what? It could be asked in that way. This is actually a e-learning platform which has been developed, and anybody can learn Hindi through the mother tongue with the help of this e-learning platform. Next is the draft charter of patients' rights, which has been released. There's nothing extraordinary in that. You can read from the notes. Next is sixth East Asian Summit has been conducted recently in Singapore. So India was represented by Industry Minister Suresh Prabhu, and the meeting took place in Singapore. So what is important for us is EAS. So EAS is an organization which was established in 2005, and it includes ASEAN members, Australia, China, India, Japan, New Zealand, the Republic of Korea, Russia, and US. So this question was actually asked by UPSC 3-4 years back. So you have to remember the member and the mandate of this organization. So it has 6 priority areas: environment and energy, education, finance, global health issues and pandemic diseases, and natural disaster management. Let's move to the next issue. So this is very important actually. So India wins the key concessions on services in RCEP. So see, as I have discussed in the earlier lecture also, India's interest in RCEP lies in liberalization of services, because it knows that goods, if there will be liberation of goods, India would not benefit, because our export industry is not very productive and cheap goods from Southeast Asia would destroy the Indian industry. But India's interest in RCEP lies in services. We want services to be liberalized so that Indian professionals can go and work in these countries, and also India can export its IT enabled services to these countries. So members of RCEP recently have conceded to the India's demand to liberalize the service market and allow the movement of skilled professionals. Let's move to the next scheme, which is RBI has tightened the Ombudsman scheme. So Ombudsman scheme was launched in 1995 when India started these banking reforms. The job of the Ombudsman, he is appointed by RBI, and his job is to solve the grievance redressal of the customers with respect to any services given by any bank. So if I have an account in PNB and PNB is not resolving some of my complaint, I can complain to the Ombudsman, and Ombudsman can impose fines on that bank, or it can order the bank to resolve my complaint. So all the scheduled commercial banks, regional rural banks, primary cooperative banks are included in the scheme. So recently what RBI has done, RBI has created internal ombudsman in all banks. So this will be the first level of grievance redress. If PNB is not solving it, if the bank manager of PNB is not solving my problem, I can go to the ombudsman of PNB with my complaint. Because see, a person who is of that bank, he knows the matter more clearly. So this ombudsman would be appointed by the bank with the prior approval from RBI, and that internal ombudsman would be appointed for 3 to 5 years, but which cannot be renewed. Let's say next issue is Battle of Haifa. So Haifa is actually, it's 100 years of this battle has taken place this year. The Battle of Haifa was fought in Haifa, which is in present day Israel, and it was fought between the British and the Ottomans and the Germans. And since India was under British, so this war was fought by the Indian troopers. They were from Jodhpur and one or two other places. They were outnumbered by the Ottomans and the Germans, and the Ottomans and the Germans had guns, and Indian troopers fought with swords, and still they defeated the Ottomans and the Germans. That is, so it is considered as one of the last major battle in which was won through the use of swords. And it is important for India because it shows the chivalry of the Indian armed forces. So 100 years of this has been celebrated. So Indian embassy in Israel has been celebrating the 100 years of this battle. So I mean, during the World War One, till the World War One, most of the Arab countries were occupied by the Ottomans, and there was no Israel at that time. There was only one country, which was Palestine, and Palestine was under the control of the Ottomans. After World War One, Palestine became the mandate of UK. Next is Global Sanitation Convention. So this has been organized to celebrate 150 years of Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary. That will be celebrated next year, or it will be celebrated on 2nd October, and it will be actually a fourth day, or it will be a 4 day international conference in which sanitation ministers from all across the world, they will take place, and also there will be mass mobilization event which will be conducted that day, and the global convention will be aimed at sharing sanitation success stories and lessons across the all participating countries. Next is government grants trust status to Bharat Ke Veer initiative. So this initiative is actually a private initiative which aids the families of paramilitary personnel who are killed in a action. So it's kind of a private initiative where you can contribute in that. So government has given trust status to that. So now it will be tax free. Next is mobilize your city. So this mobilize your city, it was in news recently because India and France have signed an implementation agreement on mobilize your city. Mobilize Your City is an international initiative which is supported by the French and the German government and was launched in on the 21st Conference of Parties in Paris. So this Mobilize Your City agreement or this initiative, it will support three Indian cities, Nagpur, Ahmedabad, and Kochi, in their efforts to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions related to urban transport. So around 3.5 million euros will be given under this initiative by the France. Next is Atal Pension Yojana indefinitely extended. So Atal Pension Yojana was introduced to give social security to the people belonging to the unorganized sector. So under this, the pension based on the contribution, government would pay pension amounting from rupees 1000 to rupees 5000 when you will be retired. And because of its success, and the scheme was for 4 years, so now it lapsed in August 2008. It lapsed in August 2018. Now government has extended its scope and its timing. So now government has extended it indefinitely for, I mean, now there's no time period till which this scheme will be continued, and government has also broadened the scope of the scheme. So now earlier the people between the 18 to 60 years, they can take part in this scheme. Now it has increased the years to 65 years. So between 18 to 65 years, people can participate in the scheme. Also the accident insurance, that has also been increased. So all the accounts which were opened earlier, the accident insurance limit was 1 lakh. Now the accident insurance limit have been increased to 2 lakhs. Next is India agrees uh, to end the boycott, to end the pizza boycott. Now, PISA is actually, it is introduced in 2000 by OECD. OECD is actually, it's an organization of the developed, or what you call as high income countries of the world. And the aim of PISA, the full form of PISA is Program for International Student Assessment. The aim of the student was to test the learning levels of 15-year-old in maths and science, in reading, maths and science. Now, since India actually participated in 2009, and it was ranked 72 among the 74th countries. Therefore, India started boycotting PISA because it said that PISA is asking random and out of context question, and it is somehow biased towards the developing countries. But now, after 6 years, India has again agreed to participate in the PISA. And the last issue of the day is that Jan Dhan Yojana made an open-ended scheme. So this scheme has been made open-ended because which means that there are some new things have been added in the scheme. So earlier the scheme focused on households. Now the scheme would focus on individuals. Earlier the focus was that every household should have a bank account. Now it would focus on individuals. Also, the OD limit or the overdraft limit, I've explained overdraft in the previous lectures. OD, the limit have been doubled from 5,000 to 10,000 rupees. Also, the age range for availing OD facility have been increased from 18 to 65 years. Also, the accident insurance cover for the new RuPay card holder has been increased from 1 lakh rupees to 2 lakh rupees. So this ends the prelims issues of the week, and we will be meeting next week now. Thank you.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil State.